I'm Clint with ATS, so I'm going to do a quick instructional video on how our software works for all of our modules. Our software is called the GateWay software. You'll see it kind of down here on the left side. So we have firmware that goes into the box, which is this guy, and then we have software which goes onto your computer. And what you're seeing here is essentially our GateWay software. So first thing you would do is you would download it. I'm going to unplug it. You'll download your software. As soon as you download your software and install it, you'll see what you're dealing with here. This happens to be version 1.16. By the time you see this video, we'll probably be well beyond this because we're constantly updating it. But the point is after you download the software, okay, it's going to run on a Windows computer. This happens to be a Mac that I'm emulating Windows 10 in the environment, and then I'm just running it in Windows. So if you have a Mac, don't worry, just run Parallels or any of the Windows emulation software. As soon as you plug in the USB, it's going to see it and just allow it to connect to your computer. Now, okay, so as soon as you see that screen, then that means it's identified the version that you have. So our firmware version, which is in the box, is 203. Now, it'll identify whatever box you have, whether it's an IntelliBoost or it's an Alice controller or it's an 8HP controller, or in this case, our Hemi 8HP Hellcat controller, this is one encompassing box that does the engine and transmission and essentially transfer case. So it does everything all together. But the key is it identifies exactly what box you're running. So it literally took the guesswork out of it. So first thing you're going to see is our vehicle options. So our vehicle options, in this case, we have to tell the GateWay software what we're doing with this thing, what vehicle we have, right? So in this case, this is a 15 JK. So when you have this fresh, this will be blank. You'll be forced to set your VIN number in here, and then there's a set button here, and you'll hit that set button. Very, very important. Make sure that VIN number is right. It locks it to the box. The only way for us to reset that VIN number is if you actually send the box back to it. Send the box back to us, and then we can reset it. But just pay attention to it before you actually save it. In this screen, you'll see the setting. Like universal would be if you're going to put this thing like say a 1957 Chevy and you want to run a Hellcat in it or whatever, or a bulldozer. Universal allows the software to actually look for analog inputs, and you'll be able to set up those analog inputs. If you're, say, running this in an 06 Gen 3, 1500 Ram truck, you would hit 06, 07. So this, we're continuing to populate it. So it has all the different settings inside of it. So since we're on a Gen 2, this is a 2015 Wrangler, I'm going to set this. Now you notice down here it says saving settings. It automatically saves. So you don't have a save button. All you do is you just click out of it, and then it saves it. Imperial in metric is a really cool setting. That obviously changes everything from either Imperial all the way through. I mean, even when you get into data logging, all your conversions, everything all the way across the board, and it's real time. So you can go literally from Imperial to metric anytime, like when it's running, and it actually converts everything. So, don't worry about it. It's just for your convenience. The odometer reading at swap, this is basically what your vehicle is, vehicle odometer at swap, how many miles your vehicle had on it. This one, I just put in 5 because I was messing around and I obviously locked the box. In this particular Jeep, it should be I think 50,000 miles or whatever. So that would be, say, 50,000, whatever is on your vehicle, whatever is on your odometer. And I'll explain later why we decided to add that little feature. It's more of a convenience item for you. So when you come down now, so we're in vehicle settings, now we're going to go down to conversion options. Conversion options basically gives you, tells you everything that's going on with what you're converting, what you're putting into it. In this case, this is a 22 TRX 6.2 Hellcat and an 8 HP transmission and the transfer case. So in this case, if we were doing an 8 HP only, it would be transmission only. Then it wouldn't bring in all the engine information. In this case, we have the engine and transmission. We're doing both. And again, this stuff will we'll start to add more and more options of these as we're adding more motors to it or different engines. On the odometer, this portion of it, this is how many miles is actually on the new engine or transmission you put it in. We're putting that in because we can compare it. If we know how many miles is on your vehicle and we know how many miles on your engine, then we can track those in the software separately, so it allows you to know how many miles was on your engine, in a year or 2 years or 5 years from now, versus what's on your vehicle. So you don't have to calculate that. We calculate that for you. As far as the trans goes, we're going to have option 1 and option 2. Option 2 right now, we're going to put the year breaks in here so you know what exactly option 1 and option 2 is. But that is basically, essentially, in layman's terms, that's like early FCA versus late FCA. If you had an early 8 HP and you had, say, a 5.7 or a 6.2 engine, then that's early code. If you have, like in this case, a 22 TRX Hellcat, that's all late model stuff. So we'll put those year breaks in there, but essentially everything here is on the engine side. Now, this is really important. So obviously, the 8 HP is an 8-speed, like this vehicle had a 5-speed in it. And anytime you put in 8 HP in anything, whether it might be like a 1500 or a Ram 1500. And in that case, it had a 545. Well, you're going to have to supply a shifter, right? Well, we have a lot of shifter options. We can look at any of the shifters. In this case, it was a NAG1 shifter. So I selected NAG1. But say you want to run a late model, like a shifter out of a Trackhawk or out of a JL, or JT or who knows what, right? This is a later model shifter. Then you just select that shifter. That would be OEM 8 HP late model shifter. Or say it's an early shifter like the one in the Charger Challenger that has that little T-handle deal. That would be this guy. If you wanted to go to, say you had the Rooster Comb, which is pretty cool. We're building that box, and that is basically a box that will hook to your cable. So if you had a 545 or a 66 RFE, say in your 1500, and you're going to an 8 HP controller, then there's no shifter that came with that because it's on the column, right? Well, what this does is that allows your cable that you disconnected from your transmission, and it connects directly to our box. And then in that case, you'd hit your rooster comb. We call it a rooster comb because actually, like inside of a transmission, a factory transmission, it has a rooster, right? It has the different detents. They call it a rooster comb. So that is hooked to a potentiometer. The potentiometer goes into our 8 HP controller, and we identify that. And then when you go to this portion of when you went to rooster comb, then it's going to give you additional settings down here, and that will allow you to actually go in and do your calibration. So when you do your calibration here, essentially once it's all hooked up, you would put it in park. It would set your voltage. You would just hit set, and then you would put it into reverse, and you hit set, and you put it into drive or neutral, set, blah, blah, blah. Then you go all the way down, you go to your tap shifter, left and right, right? So, and now the tap shifter obviously is not in the rooster comb box because it's solely designed to emulate your manual shifter that's on the column. Your tap shifter are separate inputs that you'll program for up and down. So it could be buttons on your steering wheel. It could literally be anything you want. So, I mean, we can configure that in all the manual pages. And then, of course, park, and then your shift interlock. So that's all relatively straightforward. We'll go into more detail with that, but I'm going to go back here now and go back to my nag shifter because that's what's in this vehicle. You notice it automatically saved, and then that goes away. So that's starting to give you a pretty good idea of like how configurable this thing is. I mean, we've really designed the software to be incredibly robust and incredibly intelligent, but we do all that stuff in the background and just make it easy for you to know what you're configuring. Once you do all your configurations, then everything in the module is kind of set. And again, we're always building on this thing. So in this particular setup, this is our fan control. Okay, so in this particular setup, the TIPM in the 15 Wrangler actually controls the engine fan speed. Well, engine fan speed sometimes is going to be controlled by us, by our box, directly, or it might be controlled by the TIPM, or it might be controlled by the ECM. So depending on whatever it is, we kind of don't really care. We can configure to it, but we have to give you control whether how your fan, when it turns on, when it turns off. So we added that in the software. So what we've done here is I have a 175 degree thermostat in this engine. Normally it's like 213, it's pretty hot, but because of the constraints of it and everything else, and I just wanted to run it cooler, especially being, pretty heavy off-road. So I put a 175 thermostat in it. So what I did is I configured this fan to turn on 185 degrees. Now, what's cool about Chrysler is their fans are PWM. And all FCA fans are completely PWM. Now, from the factory, they kind of give you high, medium, low. Well, once we identified that it's not necessarily high, medium, low, there are literally 100 steps that we can control the circulation of this fan. So we just broke it down for you. So we gave you a lot more control than even what the factory kind of controls it at. So that would be off at 185 degrees, it turns on. At 195, it turns on to low, and then mild, obviously 205, high 210, and then max, it's 220. This is literally real time. So you can start the engine, have it running. This is what your actually engine temperature is. And again, this is all being broadcast from the ECM. So the engine control module is gathering all that information. It's sending it to our translator. Our translator, we're translating that to the software that you're looking at, and this is real time, so you can adjust the translator real time as your engine's running. I've got the engine shut off right now, obviously, so we can hear. But so this is your actual engine temperature, and then this is the duty cycle. So something you might notice is so this is for testing, right? So if I go to our manual command just to make sure everything's working properly, I just hit max. You notice nothing's green here. That means being nothing's green, nothing's going to turn on. This is going to be controlled because we're in a manual test mode. So now that we're in manual test mode, you hear the fan coming on? So that's our engine fan that's actually cycling. So that'll sit there and you run us out of here until we turn it off. So I'm going to go back to off. And then now it's green. So now that it's green, that tells us that the translator has control of the vehicle instead of us. We just put this in here so you can test your wires, make sure everything's cool. This is literally sending information to the TIPM, and the TIPM is controlling the fan. So everything's factory, but on this model, when we removed the 3.6 computer and added the 6.2 computer, then that all that data changed. So the TIPM would have no idea like what the 6.2 Hellcat computer is saying because it's a different language. So we have to translate all that. So again, we make it easy. Now, what's kind of cool, we also added this on the trans side. So this is the trans temp, right? You'll notice that I've got it 251. I did that because I do not have, in this model, I do not have the transmission cooler in front of the radiator. So everything in this is the engine radiator, linear fan, right? Pay attention. This is very self-explanatory. When you see engine radiator, that means that this is all for the engine radiator. This is for the engine side. This is for the trans side. If I was to go in here and put in different numbers, I put in 251 because that's the max temperature. So that basically, 255 is the max temperature, but this will basically ensure that fan never ever turns on based on transmission temperature. And I did that because my transmission on this one is actually in the back of the vehicle. So I've got a separate fan and a separate relay control that will control the transmission temperature. And I'll get to that here in a little bit in the manual configurations. So in this setup, now, if you wanted to have this control off of other things like the intercooler, we've also thought about that, set that up for you, which I'll show you here in a little bit. But in this case, the bottom line is if you had a transmission cooler in front of the engine radiator, then you would want to set these. That way, when the engine or the transmission got hot versus the engine, then it would turn on the factory fan through the TIPM and cool down the transmission. And that's kind of how they are in factory mode. So as we're kind of moving back, so you got your back button, right? So we've got everything fixed up there. Now, so So in a typical situation, if you were not running an external fan, then you would basically set this up probably to trigger on at like 160 to 170. Again, this is depending on your transmission, right? So if you have a cooler bypass block on it, or if it has a cooler bypass block on it factory, and then it's going to push it up to 170 or 180 or 190 anyway. So bottom line is you never want to turn your fan on until your thermostat actually opens. In most cases, I recommend removing the cooler bypass from any transmission. That way, all your transmission fluid is going through the tranny, and keep it as cool as possible. Ideal temperatures are, 160 to 200. You can run them 160, 180. It's great. So in a typical situation, you might run this to like 165, 175, 185, 190, and then maybe 200 max. So very similar to what I have here. Again, I'll put these recommendations in the instruction manual. And you just mess around with them and kind of play around with it based on your application. So we're going to go back. And then, so cruise control. Cruise control is a function of many modules on all the different vehicles. I mean, every year, make, model, they're kind of unique. Some have a cruise control module, some have the cruise control built into the ECM. Some of them have tip-em functions. So it's kind of weird. Regardless of that, you don't have to worry about that because, again, we're going to step in and we're going to do all that hard work for you in that math. And if it's sometimes we handle the cruise control directly in our box. Sometimes we broadcast this information to the modules. How we do it, you don't have to worry about it. All you have to worry about is setting your speeds. So what we do on this is basically the analog inputs on your controller. So we have this guy, right? We have all these buttons. And when you look at these different, I'm sorry, not buttons, but wires, these different wires, these are drivers, or it either supplies power to a solenoid or an output or whatever, or it receives information. In this case, we need to receive information. We need to know what that information is because, again, on this vehicle, in most vehicles, those steering wheel controls, they actually go to the ECM. And if we're switching ECMs, then all of a sudden we don't have them anymore. So what we've done is we've pulled the wires directly from the ECM and we run them to our controller, and then you'll do basically the same thing. So you'll go in and hit your on-off button, and then when it's giving voltage, you set it. Then you hit your cancel button, you set it. You hit your increase button, you set it. Your decrease button, you set it. Nice thing is all these buttons are generally all the same because it's all FCA steering wheels. And I mean, this could be these could be push buttons or something. It doesn't necessarily have to be the steering wheel, but for the most part, I mean, if you're running cruise control, you're going to be running the factory inside, so your factory steering wheel and factory dash and all that kind of stuff. So let's utilize all your factory buttons. The whole key on this is to make this vehicle like it drove off the showroom floor, like stock factory, like everything works. So your idle voltage, which is your just your live voltage, and then obviously parts. So that kind of sets everything. And when you hit it, auto save. And then once you save them, you're done, and then we can link all that information into the cruise control module or logic, whatever that is. Again, not to get tied up on those details. So now we're going to output controls. These output controls are incredibly configurable. And this basically, we have three these are not PWM. That means they're not modulated. This particular set are all designed to either latch a relay to ground or latch it to power. Switch to low means ground. Switch to high means positive. That means when you tell one of these outputs on the top three to turn on, it's going to send out a ground signal, which is going to ground your relay. And that means if you ground your relay, then you have to have power on the other side. We'll do the same thing on the bottom. If we send high out, we send power out, then we are going to send 12 volts to your relay. You have to ground the other. These are not high current outputs. They're not very much. I mean, they're good for a relay. The box is only designed for a couple amps total. And these things, I mean, they're good for maybe 3 amps max. I wouldn't even recommend going to 3 amps because you might actually pop the main fuse and then your whole controller goes down. So these are designed literally just to do the low work, which means turning on a relay and then you let the relay do all the hard work. So in other words, if you wanted this thing to turn on like a winch, you would turn on a little relay. That little relay would handle the heavy stuff on the other side. But this is everything we have configured currently. We're literally adding stuff to this daily. So if it's not in here, don't worry about it. If it's something really unique that you would like us to add, you could probably put in a request to us. We could probably add it for you. So over time, this thing will probably be, I don't know, 30 or 50 or maybe 100 deep. But it's kind of designed, in this case, if you didn't have a driver for your fuel pump relay, then you would hit your fuel pump relay trigger. And the reason we do that, because if you say give this vehicle to your wife, and she decides to go down to the park, and she wants to put in her headphones and listen to the stereo, and have the key on, you don't want the fuel pumps running all the time, right? So we basically set up just like the factory does. As soon as, if the engine is not running, then it turns off the fuel pumps. As soon as you start to crank and it's running, the fuel pumps are running. As soon as the engine size, it doesn't see engine RPM, then we turn off the fuel pumps. So it's all very factory level, and we do these things for a reason. Your reverse light trigger, auxiliary cooling fan, for instance. If you want to turn on an auxiliary cooling fan that is just essentially going to be, in my case, I've got an auxiliary transmission cooling fan set on this thing. So I set that up, and then this, so I'm going to turn it off. Well, let me add this one. So I'll show you, let's add the cooling fan, right? You're going to see that pop up. Okay, when that pops up, you hit it, and you're going to be able to get to this screen. Now, you can actually select, what do you want it to do? Is it derived from your engine coolant, or an intercooler temperature, or your transmission fluid temperature? So remember, I have an external transmission fan on this one, so I chose transmission fluid temperature. So we're now looking at the internal transmission fluid temperature of the 8 HP that's digital, that's basically being sent from the TCM. We're receiving that information. We're using that input, and then we allow you to switch a relay, and that relay will turn on at 180 degrees. It will turn off at 170 degrees. You can't switch those. If you do decide to switch them, we kind of fix that for you. So it doesn't allow you, because you have to have your off speed lower than your on speed for obvious reasons. It gets up to a temperature of 180. It cools down to 170. Once it cools down to 170, then it basically turns off, and then it hits 180. So there's hysteresis there. So very simple. On temperature, off temperature. That's your actual temperature of the transmission as it sits right now in this vehicle. And if you wanted to try it, you could turn that on, and you're not going to hear it because it's in the very back of the vehicle above the differential, but I just turned that coolant fan on. Well, actually, you can kind of hear it. And then I'm going to turn that off, and I just actually noticed a little glitch here. We should have turned that purple. So generally when it's green, we'll have that fixed by the time you see this video. But when it's green, that means you're good to exit, so now it's green, so you're good to exit. So that's all you got to do. So that's all your analog outputs, right? Again, on the switch to, I'm going to turn this one off. Go disabled. And you can do as many as you want. You could do like a latching fan relay. You could do 2 or 3 of them if you wanted to. Say you want to do like a high-speed fan or a low-speed fan. You can be creative here. I mean, there's a lot of things that we're allowing you to do. You just got to kind of be smart about it. But again, we've kind of made this thing as simple as possible, all menu-driven. No real secrets. So that's your high side. You'll notice all the same ones in there. That's just going high. And then this is your data logging portion of it. So you got in the engine data, in the 8 HP data, you have either engine data here or you have trans data. This is your engine data. Essentially, your engine data is a scan tool. It literally gives you most of what you need to diagnose this vehicle. Obviously, engine speed, engine torque, engine temperature, air-fuel ratio, boost, intercooler. These things change based on what engine selection you have. So if you were to select a 5.7 Hemi earlier in the vehicle configurations, you're not going to get boost pressure and intercooler pressure because it doesn't exist. So we kind of preload all that stuff. We're adding more and more of this stuff as we go. But important things like throttle position sensor, oil temperature, all of these kinds of things. Well, when you get in here, look at your odometer, right? So your odometer miles that's on the vehicle, then your odometer at conversion, and then the difference. So this is what's on your engine when it went in. That's the difference, right? So this screen kind of is this data. Also, what's really cool about this, and we basically built this for us so we can help you guys diagnose things. Go to your start logs. As soon as this is running, if you want to start a log, you just hit start log, and you're now data recording. So you're going to data record all that information, everything that's in this screen and your 8-speed, 8 HP side, which I'll get to in a second. But anyway, you start your logs, you're going to see all that. And then when you go to look at it, then you go to open logs. It's going to bring up this screen, and it's going to automatically dump that log into the screen. All you got to do is open that up as an Excel. You can look at all that data for comparisons or whatever you want to do. You can also send that to us so we can help you diagnose something if you're struggling a little bit. So again, this is all about the user experience and how, make sure this thing works for you and kind of get this thing across the, out of the driveway so you can drive it. And then on the 8 HP side, same thing. Your TRS, your engine speed, turbine speed, obviously the engine's not running, your throttle position, your transmission temperature speed, the lock status, output speed, blah, blah, blah. Again, tow-haul mode, all of these things, whether you're running, like if you're running an Alice conversion, all this stuff's going to be different. But it's the same software. So you notice our software version is 1.16. That's the software in the computer. The firmware version is the firmware in the box. Okay, we look at that firmware version and we identify with what's going on there, then we populate the software. So all you need is one software suite from us to do all of our electronics products. And then getting back to some of the other basic stuff, whether you have a check engine light, on or off, that type of thing. So you'll continue to find things are populated in this GateWay software as you go, and you can find the GateWay software on our website. We have a particular section under conversions in the website. You won't have a hard time finding it, but just download the software. Very straightforward. It's got to be on a PC, and then plug it in and kind of go from there. So hopefully this was educational for you. Hopefully this kind of gets you a little bit across the finish line of understanding what's going on. But there are definitely other modules out there in the world that allow you to do kind of an engine conversion or a transmission conversion. But none of them do it like the GateWay or like the ATS Translator technology and using the GateWay software. We use all factory intelligence, essentially all of the information that the factory that they use when they build a new vehicle. We take all that information and we bring it in and we connect all the dots. So the way we're putting this stuff together and then also giving you all this analog out and analog in. So this is a very versatile box. It's incredibly powerful. And at the end of the day, you're going to have a vehicle that actually drives like it did off the showroom floor, and you're going to be able to use factory calibrations, which is something that you almost can't do in the aftermarket world today, and really our drive to allow you to start with factory calibration, so you don't have to do a lot of tuning. But most importantly, so that stuff has been certified from the factory for all 50 states, including California. They've spent millions of dollars in making these calibrations work. Not only do they work fantastic, but they're also certified with the federal government, which means that you're not deleting, so to say, or modifying these things. So you don't have to make them illegal, which means we're going to be able to drive these vehicles on the road safely and legally, so we can all stay out of trouble and continue our hot rodding. So I'm excited to bring this stuff to you. My team and I have been working hard on this. There's a bunch of us that have been, just down in the submarine, like really, really working on this for the last 4 or 5 years. And it's starting to be something you guys are going to be able to purchase and I'll put this stuff together. So stay tuned for additional information, and we'll go back and we have more information in the suite platform.